All right, that does it for me for now. Wow. I'll see you again tomorrow. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Lawrence is back just in time. Lawrence, we missed you so much.
Well, Rachel, it is so great to be back. And this result in Wisconsin is a huge, huge defeat for Elon Musk, who, as we saw, personally went full cheesehead, thinking, that's how to appeal to people in Wisconsin, and handing out those $1 million checks, literally trying to buy the election, physically doing the buying on TV. So this is just a huge setback for Elon Musk and therefore for Donald Trump.
When I first saw the news at the end of last week that Musk was going to not just put his money into this race, but that he was going to physically go to Wisconsin, do a campaign event, do this stunt where he pays voters and do this whole thing again, I thought, that is great news for the Democrats. Because there are few people in American public life who are as underwater in terms of the way the American public views them as Elon Musk is. But seeing the way that Mr. Musk behaved in Wisconsin, seeing the way that MAGA media portrayed this as something that was actually going to help that candidate there, I started to wonder, maybe I'm looking at the wrong polls. Maybe they're seeing something else that I'm not seeing. Maybe Elon Musk is going to help this guy. But this is to have this margin within less than an hour to have this call within less than an hour of polls closing with the kind of margin it looks like it's going to end up there in Wisconsin. This is just a kick in the proverbial teeth to the White House and to Mr. Musk.
I had certainly been told not to expect a call before 11 p.m. and therefore write as much TV show as you want because, you're not going to have the breaking news moment. And it turns out I didn't. You did. And that's important, too, how quickly this was called, which is to say how decisive this win has to be at this point.
That's exactly right. And this is going to, they just pulled Elise Stefanik's nomination to be UN ambassador because they were worried about their ability to hold on to her seat, which she just won by 24 points. The Republicans and Elon Musk are in a position right now where they have to worry about seats that have 24-point Republican margins. They have to worry about losing seats like this in a statewide race in a state they just won by what looks to be a decisive margin where you get the call within the hour. The American people are speaking in lots of different ways, but this is the first time they've really had the chance to speak at the ballot box, and it is with an exclamation point.
Well, as we saw Cory Booker in those remarkable 25 hours, one of the things that sustained him, that carried him through it, was something that we've never seen before in a filibuster like this, and that was direct communication from voters while it was happening. Emails, including in the middle of the night last night when I was watching. My favorite time to watch a filibuster is middle of the night, the lonely hours for the senator who's up there speaking. He received a series of emails from Wisconsin, and he was reading those emails from Wisconsin voters that were so powerful about their worries about Social Security, about their future. And I can't help but link those up to what we're seeing in actual expressed voter results tonight in Wisconsin.
Yeah. It also strikes me, Lawrence, that, when Trump was trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election, and he had those dozens and dozens and dozens of failed pseudo-legal efforts to try to get somebody to side with him in overthrowing the election results, the place that he got closest was the Wisconsin Supreme Court. When it was under conservative control before a few years ago, when the liberals sort of took control of that court, they got real close on the Wisconsin Supreme Court to essentially nullifying the vote in Wisconsin on the basis of Trump's fake fraud claims. The idea that we would have gone through that with the Wisconsin Supreme Court in 2020, and then they would have reinstated a new MAGA majority on that court, thanks to Elon Musk coming in with tens of millions of dollars and $1 million checks for voters, promising that this guy will be a vote for Trump, will be a vote for the MAGA agenda. The counterfactual here, the idea, what we'd be talking about right now, had this race gone the other way, I think would be a really sobering and difficult national story. And instead, what we've got is people saying, saying no to Trump and Musk in a very emphatic way.
We're going to get House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries' reaction to this election and to those Florida special elections for the House in this hour. And one of the things to look at in this, Rachel, is if you're a Republican member of the House of Representatives and you won your seat by less than 30 points.
Yes.
How much specific help do you want from Elon Musk, and do you want him to physically come to your congressional district and put on whatever silly hat he wants to put on and campaign for you? And I would say yesterday the answer was probably yes from every Republican in the House. What's the answer tomorrow?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we'll see what those margins end up being in Florida compared to when Waltz was running and when Gates was running in November. But yeah, if we're now talking about their margin of safety is like a 20-point margin, that's going to change everybody's jobs.
Yeah, and as we go forward here, when you think of today, I mean, today was already feeling like a turning point for me, and maybe it's my experience working in the Senate that makes me so Senate focused. But what I saw Cory Booker do in those 25 hours on the Senate floor is unlike anything I have ever seen there before. And it felt to me like, aha, here it is. Here's the Democratic voice. Here's what the opposition sounds like. That Cory Booker found that voice, delivered that voice, is that voice, and was that leader out there today. And every Democratic senator who supported him and helped him by asking questions so that he could rest his voice for a minute or two, every one of them was better on the Senate floor today because of the way Cory Booker rose to this occasion and brought them all up with him. And then you get these voter results tonight. And this date does feel like a turning point day in this year of American politics.
The other reason it feels like a turning point is because you're back. And you were gone for a really long time, and that in itself sucked. But you were also gone because you had some illness, and we were all worried. And the fact that you're fine and back also feels really, really good as any of those other things, and you're never allowed to go away ever again. You
know, this morning was my first morning not starting in a doctor's office in the last, 2 weeks or so. And I really got used to it. It really was okay. But I couldn't have asked for more energy delivered to this process today than Cory Booker did, and this election coverage we have tonight. And Rachel, I really appreciate you so much, and so much in the last couple of weeks, and your personal encouragement that you gave me.
Okay, stop now. Go talk to Hakeem Jeffries.
Thank you, Rachel.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Tomorrow is what Donald Trump is calling Liberation Day, but Democrats are worried it will become Black Wednesday as the markets react to Donald Trump's new worldwide reciprocal tariffs. Economists are worried also, so are business owners, investors, consumers, and some Republican lawmakers who are fielding calls from panicked constituents. Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans and NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona. Melanie, tell me about what Republicans are hearing from their constituents.
Yeah, there's a lot of uneasiness right now among Republicans, particularly those who have a lot of farmers in their states, who have these big agriculture industries in their home states. And I caught up with Glenn Thompson. He's the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and he said that he has already asked the White House to exempt certain products and goods that are important to the Agriculture Committee and the industry, like fertilizer and peat moss. I also spoke to Marionette Miller Meeks. She's an Iowa Republican. She was traveling around the state yesterday with the Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, and what they heard from farmers is that they are very concerned about the prospect of a prolonged trade war. And the Congresswoman said they sought to assuage farmers, that there are multiple options at their disposal to help provide some relief to blunt the impact of these tariffs, including potentially a bailout. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, there's also at least 2 Republicans that we know of who are willing to cross party lines and back a Democratic resolution that would essentially block the proposed 25% across the board tariffs on Canada. However, obviously that would be something that would die in the House because it would be largely a symbolic resolution. It wouldn't go anywhere. It still would be, though, a huge rebuke publicly of President Donald Trump and his trade policies. But most Republicans, by and large, are saying that even though they're uncomfortable with the prospect of a prolonged trade war, they are willing to give Trump some latitude here to achieve his trade objectives, even if that does mean some short-term pain.
We were waiting a little bit earlier when we were talking about this at noon for Caroline Leavitt to maybe give some more information about what to expect tomorrow. And you've been on these calls. I've been on these calls. Like when the Biden White House would have an economic policy rollout, they'd call reporters and they'd say, here's what we're trying to do, so that we have an idea of what they believe they're getting through or they want to get through. We can push back, obviously, but they give us an idea of it. Donald Trump's team, have they been doing that? Have they been calling to say, hey, listen, here's what our tariffs are going to look like. Here's the goal here. Here's our motivation.
A lot of that's happening on television because that's the way Donald Trump does it. He's a different kind of president. We all know that. And the bottom line is he's the one who's going to make the call. So you don't know what the policy is going to be until the policy is announced.
Do they not know what the policy is yet?
I think they know what the discussions are around the policy. But Caroline Leavitt said today that there is a plan and that he's meeting with his trade people right now about that plan, and that when it happens tomorrow, when they announce it at 4 p.m., it will be effective immediately. That's what she said. And that's when the stock market fell into negative territory, because that's, for at least her understanding, is there's no grace period. There's no more negotiation after tomorrow at 4 p.m. And that's where the uncertainty comes for so many businesses. I guess the uncertainty will be over sometime tomorrow, and then they'll know for sure, sort of what kind of burdens and higher costs they have in their systems.
Maybe we can put the Dow up on our screen just so we can keep an eye on it. We were watching a couple weeks ago, maybe it was a week ago now, I can't keep track of time. After another announcement of tariffs, Donald Trump made it, and the markets just plummeted. I was talking to Senator Mark Warner a little bit earlier today, and he is worried that this will be a Black Wednesday. He's going to announce all these tariffs, and the markets are just going to sink precipitously. I know you were talking to me a little bit earlier about Mark Zandi and his prediction Moody's. After all of this, and Moody's. Tell me again.
So a couple of things I would say first about the stock market. It was already down a lot in the first quarter, so they're anticipating something rough. What Mark Zandi at Moody's said in the Washington Post, and we've since confirmed his forecast, basically worst case scenario, he says if there are more tariffs put on tomorrow, 25% decline in the stock market, 5 million jobs lost. A 1 year recession, and an unemployment rate that goes up to 7%. That's worst case scenario. I mean, you're talking about completely changing the way the global economies work. That will not happen without a lot of disruption.
Does he project farther ahead? Is this a short-term period of intense pain before there's bliss on the horizon?
Well, there are others who are less pessimistic in the near term who say, Goldman Sachs, for example, cutting its growth. I mean, everybody's cutting their growth forecasts, and they're raising their recession forecast. So 1 in 3 chance of a recession. Plenty of people think that you might still be able to avoid a recession in the near term. And then if you talk to some industries like the steel industry, the shrimp industry, some of these, some parts of agriculture who are desperate for more tariffs because they feel like they've just had their lunch eaten by foreign competitors for decades. So it's just going to be fascinating to see tomorrow if it's across the board tariffs, if it's country specific, sector specific. We just don't know.
But you also have, there are industries within or agriculture or within this country that's heavily protected against foreign undercutting, like the sugar industry. What happens to them if there's reciprocal tariffs and a country overseas decides, hey, listen, we're going to tariff the heck out of you on your exports? I mean, it's just hard to say that there's going to be an across-the-board benefit or an across-the-board detraction or pain when you're imposing tariffs like this that seem to be scattershot all around the world.
We get this certainty tomorrow, and then comes the next waves, which are the retaliation and what is targeted. And we haven't even heard from Mexico yet what Mexico is planning to target. That's all TBD. The EU has been very clear it plans to target in mid-March the very places that are going to hurt Republican senators, right? And
Kentucky bourbon.
Yep. And Iowa corn, soybeans, Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, where they make Harley Davidsons, some really, really important factories with American workers who would feel retaliation.
All right, Christine Romans, always good to have you. And Melanie Zanona, you too as well.
Forbes just released its annual list of the world's billionaires, and it is the biggest ever. 3,028 people made the cut, and they're worth a record $16.1 trillion. That's more than the GDP of every country in the world other than the U.S. and China. Topping the list, familiar faces: Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison, the family behind the LVMH empire. Donald Trump, by the way, who put billionaire at the center of his brand, made the list this year. His net worth more than doubling in the last 12 months. Joining me now is Dan Alexander, senior editor at Forbes and author of White House Inc. Okay, Dan, what is Donald Trump's net worth today, and how did it jump so much in just a year?
It's about $5.1 billion, which is up from $2.3 billion a year ago. And the two largest drivers behind that increase are, number one, the parent company of Truth Social, his social media venture, which really hasn't figured out a good way to make money yet, but nonetheless is trading on the public markets at super high prices, which implies a multi-billion-dollar stake for Donald Trump. And number two, all these crypto ventures that he's done. And those things, while you might laugh at them, you might not think that they're serious, they provide real cash. And they've roughly doubled Trump's cash pile to now where he's sitting on about $770 million of liquidity, more than he had at any time during his first term.
Wow. Okay. Forbes' analysis of this year's data makes the case that Trump is giving the billionaire class more control than ever. Can you expand on that?
If you just look at the number of billionaires that are in the administration, people like Howard Lutnick, Steven Feinberg, spouses of billionaires, Linda McMahon, Kelly Loeffler, of course, lots of presidents put billionaires in ambassadorial roles, but these are in really serious, center of the cabinet roles. And that's not even mentioning Elon Musk, who, of course, is sort of putting his hand in almost everything in the federal government. And this year is number one on the list with over $300 billion.
Yeah, well, can I ask you about that? Because we saw that Donald Trump seemed to be worried about Elon Musk's Teslas, in some circles becoming persona non grata. And so he, showed the Teslas on the White House driveway. He talks a lot about how he has stepped away from his business. But has this hurt his business? I mean, is there any indication that Elon Musk is losing tons of money by doing what he's doing?
Well, in some way, yes. But of course, when you have so much to start with, a huge hit you can handle. Tesla stock has declined dramatically, and that has put a dent in his fortune. But remember, Tesla's not the only company that he owns. His stake in SpaceX is at one point more valuable than his shares of Tesla. So we're looking at a guy who's got a lot of different interests. And even if one thing's going down, he still has other things that might benefit. And overall, there's just so much that Elon Musk will be just fine.
Well diversified, let's put it that way.
Right.
This is, I think, the first time the billionaire population has crossed the 3,000 mark, and the average fortune is up $200 million from just last year. But I wonder what this means on a global scale. Where is the concentration of wealth, and what about the wealth gaps getting larger?
If you look, still the United States is by far number one. So there are about 900 billionaires in the United States, out of roughly 3,000 overall. Number two is China, which has slightly over 500. Those two countries have really, been the driving powers behind this billionaires list for a long time. But then if you look elsewhere, India's big, Russia's big. You've got, billionaires in all sorts of pockets. And every once in a while we find one in, a country that you really wouldn't expect. So, but still, the places where you see the most money being created are in the United States and in China.
It is such, always, every year, an interesting read, but I find it even more fascinating this year, again, given the ubiquitousness of the billionaires, as you say, in the federal government. Dan Alexander, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
One of the senators leading the resolution joins us now, Senator Mark Warner, who is also the top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee and a member of the Finance Committee. So many different topics I can get your thoughts on today, sir, but I'm going to begin with tariffs. I know you're sending on to this resolution. There's some Republican support, but the likelihood that it's going to get to the House is small, and then the likelihood that Donald Trump would sign it is zero. So tell me the strategy here.
Well, the strategy is that we're finally back on offense as Democrats. Last week, it was the gross misuse of the Signal channel, and they're still reeling. We still don't know whether those phones have even been checked for malware. We've got allies around the world pissed off beyond belief, including the Israelis. This week, after lots of bluster about the tariffs, they're coming. We had just at the press conference a beer guy from Alexandria who gets a lot of his ingredients from Canada. He's already laid off 2 folks. We had a whiskey guy from Richmond. He's talking about the fact that in Alberta province, they're taking American whiskeys off the shelves. So the craziness of going into a trade war with our longest ally is just insane, and I think Republicans realize this. I mean, if we look as well, look at what Trump and officials themselves claim these tariffs are going to raise. They say $100 billion a year on cars, $600 billion a year on these other reciprocal tariffs. That's $700 billion a year. Who's going to pay for that? American consumers. This will be the largest tax increase in American history. It is going to send the stock markets, which are already reeling. Liberation Day, as Trump calls tomorrow, will probably be known as Black Wednesday in terms of the stock market fall-offs. And I think our Republican friends realize they've been quiet this long, but at some point they've got to step up. Last week on national security, a lot of them expressed privately to me. This week, I hope we get a few more publicly to say, calling Canada an enemy and having these across-the-board tariffs on Canada doesn't make sense. There will be other actions we'll take as we go on, as the policies of Trump, both raising prices, adding financial burden to Americans' paychecks, dealing with our allies as if they're enemies, and this totally careless approach to national security, it's building up. I'm hearing it on the road from Virginians, regardless of party. I think my Republican friends have got to be hearing the same stuff.
Yeah, they're also hearing it from the Wall Street Journal, which took Peter Navarro's comment that the $600 billion raised in tariff revenue would actually be a tax cut. The Wall Street Journal calls that Orwellian, calling George Orwell. They say it's actually a tax increase. They make the same point that it would be extremely large, the largest since World War I. And talking about going on the offensive, as you mentioned a moment ago, I want to ask you about Social Security and the launching of a war room to combat DOGE cuts to Social Security. Explain that.
Well, the fact is, when you're talking about $4 trillion of taking it out of government spend, or these numbers bounce all around, and you've got Elon Musk is a smart technical guy, but his crowd has got to be the most inept, careless, sloppy group I've ever seen. In any legitimate business, they'd be fired, because when they come into these agencies, as we saw when they fired people that were protecting our nuclear stockpiles, when they fired without reason a lot of the folks who answer the phones at the IRS. If they're going to find the monies they need, Social Security and Medicaid can't be off the table, no matter what Trump says. So the rhetoric versus the reality, and we're going to hold them accountable for that.
Senator Mark Warner, really good to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
I trust our intelligence agencies and the intelligence individuals that are within the Department of Homeland Security, that the individuals who are there are members and a part of this organization and have worked with them. And while we were there at that prison, we not only talked about how to identify these members of these terrorist organizations, but what they did, their actions they took, the case files we built on them, and how we verified that those individuals should be there in that prison. I am very confident in the fact that those individuals that are there should be there, and that by belonging to these organizations, they were choosing to be on the side that wanted to destroy the United States of America.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem expressing confidence that her agency is only removing criminals from the U.S. On Sunday night, 17 additional men were deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador. According to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the U.S. military only transported violent criminals, including murderers and rapists with gang affiliations. El Salvador's president posted another video yesterday showing the men in restraints as they were let off a U.S. Air Force plane. According to a senior State Department official, 7 of the men are Venezuelan citizens, while the other 10 are citizens of El Salvador. Meanwhile, the Trump administration acknowledged in a court filing yesterday it inadvertently deported a Maryland man to El Salvador because of an administrative error, but that U.S. courts are powerless to order his return. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a Salvadorian national who came to the U.S. at the age of 16 in 2011 after fleeing gang threats in his native land. According to Politico, he was deemed by an immigration judge in 2019 to be a likely member of the MS-13 gang, a decision he sharply contested and that the government credited to information gleaned from a confidential informant. But the court also agreed at the time that he should not be deported to El Salvador, finding that his fear of being persecuted or tortured was credible. On Monday, attorneys for the government admitted that Abrego Garcia was deported accidentally. Although ICE was aware of his protection from removal to El Salvador, Abrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador because of an administrative error. Trump lawyers said the court has no ability to bring him back now that he is in Salvadorian custody. The man's attorney is asking the court to order the Trump administration to ask for his return and, if necessary, to withhold payment to the Salvadorian government, which says it's charging the United States $6 million a year to jail U.S. deportees. Trump administration attorneys told the court to dismiss the request on multiple grounds, including that Trump's primacy in foreign affairs outweighs the interests of the man and his family, and also noted that he was not likely to be tortured or killed in El Salvador. According to his attorney, Abrego Garcia has no criminal record, is married to a U.S. citizen, and has a 5-year-old disabled child who is also a U.S. citizen.
So John, you're covering the story, and of course, the judge in 2019, during President Trump's first term, said that if he went back to El Salvador, he was likely to be tortured, right?
Yes.
So he's in El Salvador right now, and they're admitting that they made a mistake. President has a very close relationship with the El Salvador government, Salvadorian government. Can't they just say, we made a mistake? We need...
please return this man.
Please return this man, and we'll process him correctly.
President Trump just yesterday took to Truth Social to praise the president of El Salvador, thank him for his help in his immigration policies. This is the first time the administration has admitted a mistake. This is not the first time that others have said there's been a case of mistaken identity. We've heard from other family members, other immigration activists who say, look, you've swept up some of the wrong people and deported them to this prison in El Salvador, which is known as a hell prison. And this, though, the Trump administration is saying, yes, we shouldn't have deported them there, but are claiming, and again, let's make clear, claiming that they have no ability to get him back. Now that's the crux of it now. The families, this man's attorneys are pushing to say that's ridiculous. Of course you can withhold payment. Reverend Sharpton, this is something where this man needs to be returned. He's committed no crime here in the United States. He has no criminal record. Police at the time, when he was first rounded up, they said they had no evidence he was a gang member, though an immigration judge said deemed it, quote, likely because of information they got later from a confidential informant. But the fact of the matter is, this is someone who has not committed a crime here in the United States other than being here illegally. And in defiance of court recommendations, the Trump administration put him to El Salvador and claims they just can't get him back.
And I think that this is the kind of example that those of us that resist this administration ought to really be amplifying, because you have to make people in Wisconsin, in Florida, understand that could be you. This guy has no reason to be in a jail. in El Salvador. He's only there because of Trump's policies. And now the Trump people are saying we can't do anything about it, whether we believe that or not. I mean, how do you do that in the United States of America? And to say to a court, well, his interest, the president's, outweighs the family. Well, I thought the president's interest was to protect all the citizens of the United States. Here's a woman who's a citizen whose husband is there, admittedly for no reason. This is a threat to everybody, but you have to drive that to the public to understand.
First of all, no one believes that the Trump administration cannot get this guy back. If they actually want to get him back, they may not. They've been dictating the terms of this relationship with El Salvador from the beginning, paying $6 million to take all these alleged criminals. And I think the larger point, Joe, something we talk about, which most Americans say, if you have gang members who are here illegally committing crimes, get them out of the country.
Right.
People support that.
Nobody
But what
disagrees.
happens when you go in with a big net and scoop up a lot of people, in some ways indiscriminately, you're going to get stories like this.
Well, and this goes back to what we said the morning before Jeffrey Goldberg came on with the second signal info dump, which is sometimes the best political move, the smart political move, is to say we made a mistake.
Yeah.
Not going to do it again. In fact, we've learned from our mistake. And while we think this is a policy that most Americans want, and we said we were going to do, we made a mistake with this one gentleman. We're going to bring him back, and he's going to go through the correct deportation process, and he'll have due process, everything else. So, yeah, but to say we don't have the power, nobody believes that. So, again, sometimes it's just best to say, hey, we're doing a lot of stuff. We messed up. We're going to bring this guy back and do the right thing.
The problem is...
And Americans will say, okay, this policy, I support the policy, and they're admitting when they make a mistake.
The entire flights are in question because these people did not receive due process, and the judge, so there's a bigger issue going on about the entire group of men that were sent to El Salvador, and more being sent now. And now they're saying a mistake, but we can't fix it. My God. We'll be following this. We'll have much more
But again,
tomorrow.
the thing is that this is something
My God.
that, first of all, was promised on the campaign, but it was promised for criminals, right? Number one.
Right.
Number two, it is a policy that the overwhelming number of Americans support. So carried out in a way that will keep the overwhelming the Americans on your side. And when you make a mistake, admit it, fix it. And Americans are like, okay, they fixed it.